My name is Lori Fail, and I'm the senior minister at First Christian Church, Minneapolis. The custodian at the First Presbyterian Church in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, where my mom was the organist, was right next door to the First or Central Christian Disciples of Christ in Hattiesburg, where I grew up. And we weren't big enough to have a youth group or anything at the Disciples Church, so I would go to the Presbyterian Church for the youth group with my mom. But when I was real little, I would go with my mom when she would practice the organ, and I'd go hang out with the custodian. His name was Manny Wright, and I would hang out with him and help him clean the church. And I don't know if you know about buffing machines, but he would let me ride on the buffing machine when he buffed the floors. And I had my own little rag that I would go and dust with him. And he was just a friend to all the children in the church, I would say. And everybody knew him. Everybody loved him. The church members would say they loved him too. And so Manny was a part of my life in many ways. My mom would allow me to get in the car with him and go to what was considered the black part of town in Hattiesburg, Palmer's Crossing. And I would do this when mom was practicing. I would go because I adored his wife, and I would go and visit Evelyn. So this was in the 60s. So this was very unusual for Mississippi in the 60s for a little white girl to ride in the car with a African-American man into that part of town. But my mom let me do it, and I'm very grateful for that. So Manny and Evelyn were very much a part of forming who I am in many ways. So fast forward many years, and I'm in high school, and it's youth group on Sunday night, and there was always a worship service on Sunday nights. And my mom had to play the organ, so I would be there. And the youth, we decided that we would sit in the balcony, which a lot of youth do, sit up in the balcony thinking no one can see us and no one can hear us. And lo and behold, they can see you and they can hear you. But we were up there one night, and the minister at the time, Reverend Johnson, said that he wanted everybody down on the main floor for that worship service, that he didn't want anybody up in the balcony. And so Manny always sat up in the balcony on Sunday nights, and he wouldn't sit with us. We sat on the first couple of rows. He sat on the very last row. In fact, nobody on the floor would have known he was up there. And I'm sure the preacher could see him, but I mean, it was still pretty hidden back there. And so we got up knowing we needed to go downstairs. We weren't going to get to sit up in the balcony for that service. And I turned around and I said, Manny, come on, we've got to go down to the main floor. And this was the 70s. And I said, we've got to go down to the main floor. And he just said, no, I'm good. And I said, no, Manny. And some of my other friends, church friends, joined in, and we're like, Manny, no, you don't understand. We have to go downstairs. Reverend Johnson said we all have to go. And he kept saying, no, I'm good. And finally I said, look, Manny, the service isn't going to start if you don't come downstairs. We have to go. And in all of my years of knowing him, from just being a little one all the way to high school, of course I knew him beyond that, I never heard him raise his voice or be angry. And he looked right at me and said, Miss Lori, I told you no. Now get out of here. And he yelled it at me. And being the, high school person that knows everything, I thought, well, fine, just be that way, Manny. And left the balcony. Went downstairs for that service. And then I never thought about that moment again, ever, until what month was it? April of 2017, when I was standing in the oldest African-American church in Minneapolis that was formed from the oldest African-American church in St. Paul, which was formed by the slaves that escaped and left Fort Snelling here in the Twin Cities. And the preacher there, Reverend Brian Young, was telling us the story of what it's like to be African American and to know that ancestors built churches under slave labor, and then began telling us a story of slaves at a building balconies on the sanctuaries. And then they realized that the balcony was for them, that they could no longer, first they were being forced into Christianity, and you know, you have to come to worship, but now we're putting you up in the balcony, you can't sit with us. And the minute he said the word balcony, I immediately went back to this moment where Manny got so mad at me. And I saw all of us white high school youth sitting up in this balcony of a church that was all white in Mississippi. And I realized then that Manny wasn't mad at me. He was scared for his own life, and he was scared for us, because he knew that if we didn't shut up, if we didn't be quiet, if we didn't quit insisting for him to come down to the main floor, that the members of the church would be upset with him, thinking he was the one that was asking us to ask him to come down, or that we would find out from the adults what life was really like. Because we didn't know. We thought, you know, Manny's one of us. Manny can come downstairs. Of course he can come downstairs. All of those years, I never thought about that moment until hearing my new friend, Reverend Brian Young, say balcony and what that meant.